You know, for as long as Nigeria has been Nigeria, there's been this unspoken understanding, hasn't there, about presidential appointments?
Absolutely. It's always been more than just like filling slots. It's a nod to the country's diversity. You have to reflect that to keep things stable.
Exactly. It's about national unity, really. But lately you hear whispers, maybe more than whispers. A real sense of unease is growing.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we're getting into today, these concerns around President Bola Tinubu's administration and its appointments.
And it's fascinating because this balancing act, it wasn't just cooked up. It came directly out of Nigeria's own history. A history with, let's be honest, significant ethnic and religious friction.
Right. So you have the constitutional requirement for regional balance in the cabinet. That's one thing.
But the tradition, the convention, always went broader.
Mm.
The idea was to stop any one group from looking like they dominated the key levers of power.
Which brings us right to the heart of this deep dive. We've looked at several of these analyses, and they're asking some pretty sharp questions about who holds power right now.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really unpack these arguments, look at the evidence people are pointing to, and think about what it all means, especially for you, the Nigerian electorate, looking ahead to 2027.
And the core criticism, you see it repeated in several reports, is this growing charge that President Tinubu is favoring people from his own Yoruba ethnic group for really crucial jobs.
Now, the presidency strongly pushes back on this. They deny it.
Of course. But we have to remember, given Nigeria's past, these appointments are always sensitive. That fear of ethnic dominance always lurking under the surface.
Absolutely. And one political analyst, Lawal, he actually identifies 8 positions he calls the most crucial, like the real control centers for money and security.
Okay, which ones are those?
We're talking heads of the central bank, the NNPC, the oil corporation, right? Police, army, customs, the DSS intelligence agency, the EFCC anti-corruption body, and the FIRS, the tax revenue service, the big ones.
Right, the absolute core functions of the state.
Exactly. Now, here's the finding that's causing a stir, according to this analysis.
Go on.
As of April this year, all 8 of those positions are held by Yorubas.
All 8. Wow.
All 8. And apparently the appointment of Bayo Ojulari at NNPC, replacing a Northerner, that really turbocharged the debate, as one report put it.
I can imagine. So it's not just a slight tilt, it's a complete sweep in those specific, very visible roles.
But that seems to be the observation, yes. And to really understand that this is, unusual, we need to compare it. How did previous presidents handle this?
Yeah, context is key here.
Yeah.
Looking back at Goodluck Jonathan's time, at a similar point in his presidency, the report suggests a much more mixed picture. Appointments spread across different ethnic groups, north and south.
Okay, so more of a balance there, seemingly. What about Buhari?
Well, Muhammadu Buhari's appointments, that's interesting. The analyses point out that while he appointed people from distinct groups like Hausa, Kanuri, Nupe, the perception for many Nigerians was different.
How so?
Many saw those groups primarily as northerners. So, rightly or wrongly, the feeling was that his appointments skewed towards the north, which led to its own accusations of favoritism back then.
So perception plays a huge role here, regardless of the specific ethnic labels.
It absolutely does. If large parts of the country feel excluded, that feeling is real, and it damages national cohesion. Which leads us to what history professor Tijani Nania reportedly said.
What's that?
He states that having all 8 of these top jobs held by people from one ethnic group, the Yoruba group under Tinubu, is actually unprecedented in Nigeria's democratic history.
Unprecedented. That's a strong word.
It is. And Professor Nania doesn't stop there. He expresses this deep concern, that if this pattern holds, it could seriously damage national unity by making other groups feel like they don't belong, like they don't have a stake in the country's leadership. It could even, he worries, weaken their belief in democracy itself.
That's a very serious potential consequence.
It is. And Professor Nani's worry about the long-term impact is crucial. When people feel left out consistently, the whole social fabric can fray. And reports do suggest many Northerners, especially Hausa Fulanis, are quite alarmed.
Alarmed by the specific changes.
Yes, particularly seeing Northerners replaced in roles like the NNPC, the police, customs, and the EFCC.
Ah, yes, the EFCC. The removal of Abdul Rashid Bawa, who is Hausa, and putting in Ola Olukayode, who is Yoruba, that specific case, is mentioned as fueling that sense of unfairness in some northern quarters.
Precisely. And you have analysts like Isa Habibu making the point that, look, the Yoruba are a vital part of Nigeria, but just one part. Appointments need to be spread out.
Across all groups, all regions, that seems to be the call.
Now, To be fair, the government has responded. President Tinubu's spokesperson apparently said that if you look at all appointments, not just these 8, the picture is balanced.
Okay, a wider view.
Yes. Although there was apparently a social media post by an aide trying to show this broader balance with numbers, but it had errors and got deleted, which probably didn't help things.
Right, not the most convincing follow-up. And what's really interesting is that the criticism isn't just external. It's coming from within Tinubu's own party, too.
Oh.
Senator Ali Ndoum, an APC senator from the north, he actually went public saying the appointments weren't inclusive and didn't match the administration's renewed hope slogan.
That's significant criticism from within the ruling party.
It is, but then you have another perspective from within the administration. Daniel Bwala, another presidential aide, he sort of pushes back on fixating only on these top 8.
What's his argument?
He argues, essentially, that all appointments matter and that the constitutional rules about regional spread have been met if you look elsewhere. He points to the National Security Advisor being from the Northeast, the Chief of Defense Staff from the Northwest, the Secretary to the Government from the North Central.
So his point is, look wider than just those 8 specific roles.
That seems to be the gist. And the Office of the Secretary to the Government also put out statements saying they are committed to representing all regions and demographics.
Okay, so different ways of slicing the data, different interpretations.
And adding another angle, that analyst Mr. Lawwal, the one who identified the 8 posts, he also makes the case for meritocracy.
The best person for the job argument.
Exactly. He suggests maybe the president is just picking the most qualified people and their ethnicity is secondary.
But Professor Nania, the historian, he offers a counter to that, doesn't he?
He does. He basically argues that getting to a point where ethnicity truly doesn't matter in appointments, well, that takes time. It requires consistent effort towards inclusion over several presidencies to build that kind of trust.
It's not something you can just declare overnight. It needs to be demonstrated repeatedly.
Right. Now, let's zoom out for a second. Dr. Salihumo. Lookman brings in the wider context Nigeria's ongoing struggles with the economy and security, banditry, kidnappings, ethno-religious clashes.
And his point is that these huge challenges are already straining national unity, right?
Precisely. And he warns against these simplistic narratives that try to blame everything on one ethnic or religious group, like sometimes happens with the herder-farmer crisis.
Yeah, those narratives are dangerous, very divisive.
So he stresses the urgent need for government to be truly inclusive and focus on development that benefits everyone, everywhere.
And he connects the dots, doesn't he? Linking the rise of secessionist movements to this failure of inclusive governance, the lack of opportunities, especially for young people.
He does. And he touches on something many people feel, that Nigeria's federal system might need a serious overhaul to really ensure everyone feels included.
It's a big structural question. And Lookman's point that these ethno-religious fights are ultimately political problems requiring political solutions is really key.
Yes, it demands political will from the top. Which brings us back squarely to the appointments and the specific Yorubanization allegations.
Right, some sources use that exact term. Abadan Lawrence Emeki, for instance, makes a very forceful case in one analysis.
What does he argue?
He argues that President Tinubu hasn't just continued the perceived imbalance from Buhari's era, but has actually deepened it, favoring the Yoruba group heavily since taking office.
He claims it's an active process.
Yes, he alleges there's an eagerness to replace outgoing board members with Yoruba professionals. He essentially paints a picture where the economy, the justice system, the security forces are disproportionately in Yoruba hands now.
And he lists examples to back this up.
He does. He points to the heads of police, EFCC, DSS, the Attorney General, Chief Justice, NNPC, Bank of Industry, the Social Insurance Trust Fund, the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Minister of Solid Minerals, and even notes Tinubu himself holds the Petroleum Minister role. All Yoruba, according to his analysis.
That's a comprehensive list.
It is. And Emeki also brings up the perceived silence of groups like Afenifere, who historically spoke out on these kinds of issues. His argument is that concentrating power like this just fuels division and mistrust.
He even connects it to Tinubu's campaign slogan, Emi Lokan, it's my turn.
Right. He interprets that slogan as possibly signaling an agenda to empower his own ethnic group, rightly or wrongly. His warning, echoing Professor Nania, is that repeating perceived patterns of favoritism, just with a different group in charge, is a recipe for instability.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've explored the deep roots of ethnic balancing in Nigeria's politics.
We've laid out the specific accusations against President Tinubu's appointments, particularly that concentration in the so-called top 8 roles, which analysts call unprecedented.
We've looked at how this compares to past presidents and the different perceptions surrounding their choices.
And we've heard the serious concerns raised about what this means for national unity, for relationships between different groups, for stability itself if this perception of imbalance continues.
We also noted the official denials and counter-arguments focusing on broader representation and merit.
But that stark picture in those key 8 posts, as presented in the analyses, that definitely remains a major point of discussion and concern for many.
So it really leaves a critical question for you, the listener, the Nigerian electorate. When you consider everything we've unpacked from these sources, the history, the current appointment landscape as described, the potential consequences people are worried about.
What does this pattern suggest to you about inclusivity under the current administration?
And perhaps more importantly, as the country looks towards 2027, what implications might these trends hold for the idea of equal representation, for that feeling of belonging for all Nigerians in their own country?
It's definitely something worth reflecting on deeply.